That's gonna be great.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, guys. We have a faithful remnant. Let's do this. And yeah. God has been following, just want to pray to you because all right, guys, we're grateful that we have a faithful remnant. Let's do this. Hold on. And yeah. God has been following. God, thank you for your grace. And we just want to come to you and just thank you and be mindful of this moment, be mindful of where we are right here, right now. And so grateful for all that you do, all that you are, and even how we can connect ideas that are of the mental health capacity directly to scriptures and how you care for us in that way. You care about our health, you care about our minds, you care about our bodies, and you absolutely, most definitely care for our soul. And God, we're just grateful that you are a God that shows so much care and compassion. And you do that through many different ways, even through your sternness and your discipline, God. You show us love and you help guide us through the many twists and turns of life. And so I pray that we fix our eyes on you, on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, and we really lay hold of the promises you've given us. We love you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, the dream team will be here with good stuff.
Not here.
So I'm thinking about how we navigate the mental health system. Because I think we talk a lot about mental health and the power of good therapy and good mental health care. Something that's been stated often in this class that we've been having today. So I want to help us figure out, well, what do I do? Like a lot of other people, I suffer from what I would call white page syndrome. I don't know if you're familiar with the show SpongeBob, but there's an episode where he has to write an essay. He's sitting there procrastinating on it, and doesn't know what to write. He finally writes down the word "the," and that's about as far as he gets. That is my life. That white page syndrome of there are so many options in front of me, so many different ways I can go about doing this. I have no idea where to start, therefore I. So my goal with us in this PowerPoint in this presentation is that we are empowered enough by the verbiage and the lingo that is used in the system, as well as the different options, that instead of feeling overwhelmed by all the different acronyms and things, we can feel more empowered to know where to start, or kind of what we're starting to look for. I think the best way to beat the system is to help each other through it. So my goal is to help us really have at least the first step down when it comes to seeking good mental health care. So I'm going to skip this because I already introduced myself earlier. But I do want to add that I have been involved in the mental health system personally and professionally for the last 7 years, both as a patient and as a practitioner. I started out in the intake department of a psychiatric hospital. So I worked in both outpatient and inpatient intake. So I helped people both with getting into the hospital for overnight stays, but I also helped people with intensive programs and getting them into intensive day programs as well. So I've helped people in a variety of different life situations figure out what the next step is regarding mental health. So I want to talk about kind of why we pursue mental health treatment, why we pursue therapy. So I'm gonna ask a couple of audience participation questions, because will help us speed up our digestion a little bit. But when do you think it would be appropriate to see a therapist? Why, or in what life stage do you think it would be helpful?
When you feel stuck and incapable of kind of helping yourself get to a new space.
Yeah.
When your normal day-to-day life is interrupted in ways that are out of control.
Yeah. Absolutely. Great point.
When you've tried increasing exercise and dieting, a bunch of other stuff, and it hasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think someone that I've added are, you've been feeling off for longer than normal for you, or you are having issues in your relationship with your spouse or loved one, or you're about to get married or in a relationship with someone and things are just going well, but you want to know how to better help each other when you're about to make a major life choice, buying a home, going to college, or moving. Anytime where you feel like second opinion or even an unbiased third party that will let you work through what's going on and be helpful is when therapy really can help. So some of the barriers of pursuing mental health assistance, this one's more rhetorical, but I think some of them are, for one, stigma is I think a big one. It can be really hard to admit to each other while I'm in therapy. There can still be a cultural belief that therapy is just lying in a shade lounge while somebody goes through your dream journal or tries to talk about things that aren't really relevant to you. There can be a stigma that therapy is meant for people who are weak, who don't know how to handle their emotions, who don't know how to function. So that can be one of the reasons. The other, I think, is a lot of practical is, well, where do I start? Who do I go to? How much is it cost? How does it work? Insurance? Is it accepting of my commercial plan? Like, how does it work? Do I have to pay out of pocket and start a deductible? There's all these different acronyms and BBT and CBT and ABT and all of these. Like, how do I know which one is right for me? Will I gel with my therapist? I don't want to be vulnerable with somebody who is not going to be the right fit for me. So there's a risk involved and some vulnerability involved there as well. There's just a lot of different questions that can really lead to a lot of overwhelm. So I think the more we kind of parse through it and compartmentalize the experience, it can make it easier to kind of know which direction we're going. Right. So I want to talk about what's available from the standpoint of all mental health services. I'm going to go over briefly both high acuity services, so higher intensity services versus more lower acuity, lower intensity services. So high acuity services include, top of the list are acute inpatient care. So stabilization, detox, and crisis care. What's important to know about inpatient care is when we often talk about somebody going and staying in a psychiatric hospital, we believe that it's like 24/7 therapy, that it's kind of really hands-on, and in some ways it is. But the real point of inpatient care is stabilization, that short-term 4 to 5 days. Let's figure out what's really going wrong here. If we need to start something new, we get it started and see how things are going, and then we transition out into more outpatient intensive service. So it's a little different, I think, from the way we kind of look at it. Detox is the same way. There are certain substances that are physically harmful and painful to withdraw from. Alcohol, it can be fatal. Withdrawn from cold turkey without any assistance. Benzodiazepines, opiates can also have dangerous withdrawal effects. So the goal is the same in inpatient care, to have a safe and medically observed environment for somebody to detox in, while also receiving medications alongside, which is for many hospitals use Valium as an assistance to helping people detox. And so it really is about stabilization. Is how do we get people stable enough to get them into some lower acuity services so they can transition back into their day-to-day lives. Residential is kind of that more stereotypical view in a sense of what we think of when we think of inpatient. It's longer term, usually about a month or longer, and this is your day-to-day meeting and therapy and group therapy multiple times a day. Usually it's lower, a little lower acuity, it's more that you're really just intensively working on an issue. Residential is very commonly used in the treatment of eating disorders, as that is more of a longer term treatment that requires a lot of observation. And so this one is usually a longer term stay. Hotlines are, warm lines are when you have somebody who's available to really talk you through what's going on, kind of that listening ear, empathetic ear. That's what a warm line is. A cold line is more, do we need to send out a crisis worker to evaluate you? What resources do you need? Are you safe right now? It's more gathering information. And then dispatch hotlines are when you call to have a crisis worker sent out either for you or for a loved one, or for a child. Many hospitals have a crisis hotline attached to them so that they can send out an actual crisis worker to see if something needs to be evaluated, say for something like a psychiatric hold, or for further services. Intensive outpatient programs are rigorous day programs that are designed to help patients build coping skills and understand their triggers. There's usually two different kinds of outpatient programs that are offered in this way. One is called PHP and the other is called IOP. PHP stands for Partial Hospitalization Program. It's typically a 5 to 6 day program for 2 weeks that is about 6 hours a day. All of it is therapy, and there's different classes related in that program. It's usually based in DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, but there's also classes within that on medication management. Chaplains are usually involved in one class. There's nutrition, recreational therapy, and all of it is designed to help people kind of get a hard crash course on coping skills. I've heard it described to me multiple times as a hard reset in a sense. IOP are similar. It's usually a typically 2 to 3 week program. It can be 4 to 5 days a week, but usually it's about 3 hours a day. And that could be in the evenings or in the mornings. And it's the same kind of content, just on a lower amount of time. So those are your kind of intensive outpatient programs as well. So lower acuity services are group programs, and these are usually offered on a 1 hour a week basis in the communities with DBT groups. DBT groups typically accompany individual DBT therapy. So what you do is you see a DBT therapist, and then you take the skills that are learned in DBT and apply it and discuss it amongst your group members in a DBT group. So you're kind of getting that double support in that way. And then NAMI groups is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. NAMI groups are available for both individuals with mental illness as well as loved ones of people with mental illness. So it's a support group both for the individuals, and then there's support groups available for people who are caring for those with mental illness as well. Al-Anon is for individuals who have loved ones with an addiction or who are in AA or NA to receive that kind of support, because there really is even a discussion of codependency within caring for those with addiction, and that is heavily addressed in Al-Anon groups as well. And then support groups in general, there are support groups for anxiety, depression, OCD. There's a lot more with the addition of social media. It has made it a lot more popular to be involved. So support grief has quite a few support groups as well. Widow support groups, different cancer support groups, things like that are very common. So those are available in kind of that lower acuity range. Medication management is the idea of receiving psychiatric care for medication. It differs a little bit from the traditional term of psychiatry. Psychiatry used to mean that a psychiatrist would provide both therapy and medication, prescribe medication at the same time. It has really changed to medication management as psychiatric appointments are a lot shorter and more streamlined to focus solely on the medical symptoms and what's going on medically. Is your medication helping you physically, emotionally? Are you having any major side effects? So it's really focused on that. And it can also be found in family practice among your general physician as well. They may not be as kind of niche as a psychiatrist, but a general practitioner is a very great place to start when it comes to medication management. And then traditional mental health therapy is seeing a therapist or a counselor either weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. It can be short-term or long-term, depending on the needs. There are certain types of therapy that are shorter term. Solution-focused therapy is a type of therapy where you focus kind of on one problem. Let's say, I am getting ready to move and I'm really nervous about it. You can work with a therapist specifically on that issue with that specific goal in mind of how do I learn how to cope with this? What do I need to work through? Whereas there are longer types of therapy, like psychotherapy, which is focused on really discussing things with your therapist to the point where they start to understand patterns and are able to kind of work from there. So it's short or longer term, depending on the type of therapy as well as what you feel you need when it comes to the therapy experience. So I'm going to focus on specifically outpatient therapy in general, kind of who could be your therapist, what kind of therapy you would have, questions to ask a therapist, what to look for when you're looking for someone to be your therapist, if you want certain characteristics. So I want us to be able to kind of have an idea of what our preferences are so that we can narrow things down. So who could be your therapist? There's a lot of different acronyms, a lot of different terms. What it really comes down to is these are the people who are licensed in some way to be able to provide therapy. So in LCSW is what Erica is. She's a licensed clinical social worker. In the state of Ohio, they call it a licensed independent social worker. We literally just can't agree with the rest of the 49 states. I don't know why I think German crazy German didn't ask about it. The other one is a licensed marriage and family therapist. NCC is a national certified counselor, and LCDC is a licensed chemical dependency counselor. Those are individuals that have received chemical dependency certifications as well as their certifications. And LPC is a licensed professional counselor. This is somebody who has received a master's in psychology and has tested and taken their course to become a licensed professional counselor. There's also a licensed mental health counselor, a PsyD, which is a doctorate of psychology, or a psychologist. A PhD is a doctor of philosophy. Typically, this one is in conjunction with other licensures. It's not a license on its own. And then a medical doctor of medicine. Some medical doctors actually provide short-term kind of program-based counseling. I typically don't see it from an actual therapy perspective, but I do know some MDs who provide shorter term, like anxiety coping skills type of. So some demographic needs to look for in your therapist as far as what you might be comfortable with, because these are things you have a right to look for as a client. You have a right to find what's comfortable for you. So looking for age, do you feel comfortable with someone your age, older or younger? On my end, my therapist is a 75-year-old man. I'm 25. We have a 50-year age difference between us, but for some reason, it works really, really well. That's what I'm comfortable with. We get along really well. So to me, having somebody who has had a lot of life experience means a lot to me, and that's what I kind of look for. But you might be more comfortable disclosing things to somebody who's closer to your age, somebody who might be a little older, a little younger. So taking the time to reflect on who you are kind of comfortable with sharing information with is really important age-wise. Race, ethnicity, or culture. Do you find it helpful to speak with somebody who shares these characteristics with you? Do you want to have to spend the time kind of explaining things in the backdrop of your own culture, or do you find it more helpful to be with somebody who might already have an idea of what that experience might look like to you? Is something to keep in mind as well. Religion, do you want to have a counselor who is more faith-based, or do you want to have someone who is strictly secular? Do you want somebody who has a religious background, so even if it is strictly secular, they have a better idea of kind of what you're talking about or what your religious experience might mean to you? This is also something that can be really important. And then sexuality or gender orientation, would you be more comfortable with somebody who has experienced LGBTQ+ issues, or is understanding of the unique experience that comes along with changes in sexuality and gender? So some types of therapy include art therapy, music therapy, equine therapy, behavioral therapy. So these are all different kinds of therapy that we can use. Typically, they're kind of advertised on their own. Equine therapy is something I see more often with kids and teenagers. Art therapy is used often in a more inpatient or intensive therapy kind of setting. Music therapy is often used in both hospice settings, nursing homes, as well as psychiatric intensive settings as well. But I'm going to focus on what's called talk therapy. And talk therapy is what we typically and stereotypically think of therapy, where we're sitting in a chair across from our therapist, filling all our separate time. So the first one I wanted to talk about is called psychodynamic therapy. Psychodynamic therapy is the type of therapy that was really started by Freudian psychology in the mid-1960s. And that one is psychoanalytic therapy, but has since kind of evolved into psychodynamic. Psychodynamic therapy is totally unstructured. There's no agenda or curriculum. My current therapist is a psychodynamic therapist. He walks in, I walk in, I sit down, he looks to me, and he just says, talk to me. And I have to drive the boat with what we're talking about in therapy for the day. So that one can be difficult if it's hard for you to express kind of how you're feeling about things, or you kind of want to be more guided. But it's very unstructured. There's no set agenda. Because what it focuses on is revealing patterns in our emotions and behaviors by talking freely about your experiences, memories, dreams, and stressors. So one day you could be talking about your childhood, the next day you could be talking about what you're afraid of in the future, the next day you could be talking about your dreams, the next day you could be talking about what happened this week. There's no set agenda. The goal is often to uncover thoughts or behaviors that contribute to the stress, whether these are based in the past or present. So this could be kind of digging through your childhood, looking for patterns in your family of origin or how you were raised, events that have contributed to your current thinking processes, patterns that have repeated themselves over and over in your life. It's really about kind of building a roadmap of you and learning how to navigate it. It's typically viewed as a longer term form of therapy. It may take years to start revealing these patterns. So it really is kind of an investment as far as the therapeutic process goes. DBT is one I've mentioned a few times earlier. Dialectical behavioral therapy was initially developed to treat what's called borderline personality disorder, which is a sort of B personality disorder. It focuses on the idea of building tolerance to distress, building life skills, and strengthening interpersonal relationships, as well as focusing on mindfulness practices as well. Sessions are very, very structured in DBT. I have done DBT therapy before, and you literally pull out this big workbook and you go through it chapter by chapter and work on the skills in it. It's about becoming the idea of being skillful, so that when a distressing situation comes up, you have all these kind of skills in your arsenal and learn how to attack that instead of resorting to more maladaptive forms of coping. It may also include meeting with the DBT group to practice and discuss skills with peers, so that you're seeing how it works in real time, seeing how other people are using their skills, gaining better understanding, and also building camaraderie among individuals who are also experiencing this form of therapy. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy is known as EMDR. It is a trauma-based therapy that actually puts you into a REM cycle while you are still awake, and allows you to reprocess certain memories through bilateral stimulation in order to help you reduce the stress related to those memories. It crosses a natural adaptive and healing process in the brain to reprocess the event. And it may use lights, coordinated tapping, other methods to engage the mind, which is modified by stimulation. So if you've seen the movies where somebody will have kind of one of those old-fashioned metronomes kind of going back and forth, that's kind of a stereotypical example of it. When looking for somebody who practices it, it's really important to seek out a therapist who is certified in EMDR. It can be tricky because it is focused on traumatic memories and reprocessing traumatic memories. So this one is one where when you are talking to somebody who has it in their arsenal, asking them if that's something they're certified in or how they came about practicing it is really important as well. And then cognitive behavioral therapy is the idea of focusing on learning to identify negative thought patterns and how these patterns impact behaviors and emotions. Sessions are also structured, and they typically include worksheets and homework. And the goal is to rewire different patterns of thinking in order to look at situations more realistically, not just more positively. So the idea of CBT is based around kind of two different models. The first one is neural plasticity. The idea that your brain can heal itself and create new channels. So if you look at old trails where people rode a lot of wagons, like maybe on the Oregon Trail or something like that, you'll look at the track marks on those trails and there are these deep, 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 deep grooves because people have been riding their wagons back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, over and over and over for decades or hundreds of years. These are deep inset grooves that they've created. The same thing happens in our mind. The more we learn how to think a certain way, the more we create these grooves of every time this event happens and we think a certain way about it, and back and forth, back and forth. We create these very difficult to get out of patterns of thinking that are automatic for us. The goal of CBT is to take apart those thinking patterns and thought processes and start to learn how to create new grooves going in a different direction, a more positive direction. It's kind of triangular where you have your thoughts, which influence your emotions, which influence your behaviors, or vice versa, your behaviors influencing your emotions, which influences your thoughts. So it goes all different directions. So the idea of CBT is to create these new neural pathways that automatically move from those deeper grooves that were more negative to newer ones which are more positive, which is really cool to think about. Because when we look at the way we think, sometimes we can think this is the way I am, this is my state of being, I'll always be an overthinker, I'll always be a worrier, I'll always catastrophize, I'll always be nervous in this way. And then when we realize that actually there is ways for us to reprogram ourselves and create these new neural grooves because we have literally been biologically wired to be able to do so, it creates a lot of hope in that area, which is very cool. And so that is the way CBT kind of functions. So I think I have it in the pamphlets. I'm not sure we can do that, but that's fine. It's an exercise that we can do mentally real quick. And this is an example of CBT therapy, one of the exercises that we use. So I want you guys to think of a negative event, whether that be somebody cuts you off on the freeway, you get a passive aggressive email from your boss, or somebody says something that somebody says, hey, I need to talk to you later, and you don't know what it's about yet, things like that, anything that can cause some form of distress. So I want you to think of that event. And then I want you to think of whatever your first negative thought would be about that event, whether somebody cuts you off on the freeway and you're automatically enraged by that, or you get a passive aggressive email. Me, I would say, I'm fired, it's over, I'm gonna go pack my desk up and get out of here. Or if somebody says they need to talk to me later, I imagine the worst possible thing. So that's my first negative, irrational thought. So I want you to guys try to think of that. And then think of a negative emotional or behavioral consequence to that, whether that be if you're on the freeway, you honk at that person for the next 2 minutes while you're following behind them, or you're kind of edgy with your coworkers the rest of the day after getting an email, or you can't even get anything done throughout the day because you can't help thinking about what that person wants to talk to you about later. You're just hyper focused on that. So that's your negative emotional behavioral consequence of that negative and irrational thought. So go all the way back to the negative event and go down and think of, instead of that automatic thought, what could be irrational thought? Well, with the freeway, it could be, man, that was really irresponsible and annoying, but you know, that's what the consequence of driving on the highway. The passive aggressive email, I don't know, I can't read emotions through text. So I don't know if it was actually passive aggressive or not. I mean, in some ways it can be explicitly, but we don't always know. Or if somebody wants to talk to us later, oh, it could be about the birthday party they're throwing next week and they need my input. That could be just, doesn't have to be the complete opposite, but just inviting in another perspective. And then the positive or realistic emotional behavioral consequence that comes with that is, I'm a lot more present, I'm more in the moment, I'm not so enveloped in what I'm assuming about the situation or assuming about the scenario. I'm more easygoing with my coworkers. I can get my work done because my mind is not completely wrapped up in whatever this conversation is going to look like later. And it just takes reframing those thoughts a little bit to have such a major impact on how we behave the rest of the day. So that's kind of one example of, there's a lot of different exercises in CBT, and a lot of different tools and tactics that are in, that's just kind of one of them that can be used in there. So some good questions to ask the therapist during their first session when they're kind of starting to get to know them. Another way to ask these is many therapists will offer a 15-minute consultation call, and you don't even have to pay for that. And that could be a really great way to even filter out if they even meet some of your most basic criteria. So some questions would be, how would you describe your approach? Are you more hands-on? Are you more hands-off? Do you like to set specific goals, or are we kind of just trying to explore things right now? What's your kind of model that you typically use? What kind of experience do you have with my culture, my race, and sexuality? Have you researched this area? Are you informed on kind of some of the more unique challenges that are involved in here? And if so, if not, would you be comfortable with becoming more informed in that area? Have you been to therapy yourself? Have you been behind the chair in a sense? What's your experience as a client, or how do you feel about the idea of being in it as well? How do you set up goals? What do they look like? How often? How would you know that I met them? Do we check in on them? Do we change them as we go? Are they more practical, or are they more conceptual? And then what is a typical session like? Does it have structure or agenda? Are we going to go through a workbook? Is there homework? Are we just sitting and talking to each other? What kind of therapy do we practice? What modality do we use? Another one that's really helpful is, what is your after hours contact period like? Do you take email? Am I allowed to call you if there's a crisis? Can I text you? How does that all work? What are your boundaries there? What should I be aware of? Also, these are all really good questions to ask therapists when you're first meeting them, so that you can kind of know from the get-go if that's something you have chemistry with. So important areas to look at when looking into mental health agencies and practices is what programs they offer. Do they have what I'm specifically looking for? Not every counseling center is going to have medication management, and not every medication management center is going to have counseling. So it's important to know when you're looking at either their website or calling them, what programs they have. What health insurance companies are they in network with? Are they in network only with commercial agencies? Are they Medicare accepting? Are they Medicaid accepting? Is there a copay? Are they contracted? Even if I am in network with them, how much will I still owe with insurance up until my deductible is paid? What does kind of all of that look like? Do they have a sliding scale of income-based services? Many therapy services offer what's called a sliding scale, which is an income-based service that determines how much you pay based on your income. So if you have a higher income, you may be paying a little bit more. If you have a lower income, they can adjust their rates to be able to match that as well. How does an agency match with the therapist? In some ways, you are getting in touch with the therapist themselves, but some agencies that have a larger number of therapists under them will actually match you with a therapist over the phone based on what your presenting issue is and kind of what you're looking to get out of therapy. Do they have a free initial consultation or a phone call that you can set up with them, or do you meet them? Am I looking for any sort of testing, such as screening for autism or ADHD? Most counseling centers do not offer screening for ADHD or autism. There's actually specific testing centers that are made to do that, but your typical mental health agency will be able to kind of point you in that direction. Are you looking for both therapy and medication management, or just one or the other? Well, what are you kind of looking for? So these are all good questions to ask when you're looking at different agencies, looking for different services. That can kind of help you get an idea of what will best fit your needs. So this next slide, if you guys want to take a picture, is the counseling center I was able to kind of look up in the Anchorage area. The last four are both Medicare or Medicaid accepting. And I have actually, ThriveWorks is a national company. I believe they have locations in Cincinnati as well. They're all over the place. But the top ones I would say are more in network with commercial insurance. The bottom ones I try to find are Medicare or Medicaid accepting. And then the last one I really wanted to bring up. Psychology Today is a website that provides a lot of psychology related news, a lot of articles on, how to beat the winter blues, or how to establish boundaries, things like that. But they also have both a psychiatry and therapist directory. And what you do is you go to their website and you can just look up Psychology Today or look up Psychology Today /therapist finder. And you go to their directory, you can type in your zip code or your area. And what it has is it has all these different options. So it has a drop-down box that has all the different models that you could possibly have. So you can right click on which one that you are most interested in. It'll filter for which CBT therapists are in the area. Or you can look for specific issues if you're specifically looking for a therapist to address OCD or anxiety. You can click on those and it'll filter for who specializes in that area. It also filters by insurance. So if you have different insurance policies, you can filter to see who's in network with your insurance. You can filter for age, gender, religion. You can filter for online or in person. So it's a really great tool to use if you are looking for a therapist as well. These are typically all private practice therapists in the area, and it can help you if you're really looking for something specific, be able to find somebody as well. So that is all. Anybody have any questions? Well, thank you guys so much.
So, welcome back. I know we're probably a bit sleepy from lunch. I am. So there's gonna be, we're gonna do a lot of coping skills. And just a couple, just so we can get into practice using them. So before, I'm just gonna talk about emotional regulation and mindfulness. So how to control your mind and your emotions. Karen did a really good job on touching on cognitive behavior therapy and DBT. And so we're going to use some of those skills today. So as Karen mentioned about neuroplasticity, I have a video for us to watch. And then we're going to talk about the consequences of avoiding our emotions and some negative thinking patterns that we have, which come from the CBT model. And then we're going to talk about healing using the 3 R's. So one thing that I love how God designed the body and the brain is designed to heal. And one of the examples I always use with my clients is, you know, you get a human play. You really don't do much to heal. You make some neurotrauma, but cells rejuvenate by itself. Like God literally designed to heal. Or you break your bone, you get your arm, the doctor don't fix it and put something to support it, but it's able to heal on its own. And so it's just really cool because I used to think like you can't heal from trauma. You probably can learn coping skills, but it's not something that you can actually heal from. So learning this, as Kara was talking about earlier, that our brain is also designed to heal, really gave me a lot of hope, and I truly believe you can heal from trauma, just because I am living it, and it's like I said yesterday, like just like God was sharing, like I think I heard the Holy Spirit say, or broken heart is an opportunity that comes to you. And so I think when our heart breaks, our spirit is crushed, it's an opportunity for us to become someone new, because we don't make a difference. You don't come out the same if you went into that situation. So I just have a quick video that explains neuroplasticity a little bit more, and Kara touched on it, but I really like this video because it make sense a lot for me. Let's see. Let's. I think I'm weird that it's very low. Give me 1 second. Should have tested this.
That again.
Not so long ago, many scientists believe that the brain did not change after childhood. That is hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like I said, as neuroscientists call it neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity work. Brains are going to connect powerfully. There are millions of pathways or roads lighting every time you see, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well traveled. These factors are saturated with thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time you think in a certain way, practice of the past will feel a specific emotion to strengthen growth. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Learning new times will trigger different emotions without covering the zero. If you travel that road, our brains will submit the pathway more, and this way of thinking, feeling, or feeling becomes stagnation. The old pathway gets used less and less, and weakens. This process rewires by forming new connections and weakening old ones in neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our minds. If you have ever changed that habit, or thought about something terrible, you have probably pathway of the brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and direct repetition, you can rewire the brain.
So I love this video because she makes it very simple to understand. But again, I just love how God created our brains. So we just think, repentance. This is repentance, right? Like, it's not like a one-time thing. Like, it's giving more context to that. Repentance is an ongoing thing of being sanctified, the Holy Spirit. So it's just really cool that, like, I love how God and psychology kind of match pretty well. And so as we learn to identify like our triggers and our negative ways of thinking and even just put a name to our emotions, it does give us freedom of choice. Like when we are able to, like, that's not like the exercise that Kara just gave, like, that's an unhealthy way of thinking. What is true in this situation? So it gives you freedom of choice.
Right.
Rather than these just automatic ways of thinking, doing, and habits and patterns. And so it's cool because even though you may have been a certain way, again, like this is a way to become another person, another way of thinking, another way of doing. So I really love that the brain is able to heal and adapt, and that we're not stuck or doomed to one situation, that we actually can overcome and change. So avoiding emotions and negative things that can hinder us from healing. So we're going to talk about some quick ways, kind of what I shared last night about like how our emotions are created through our hormones, which are chemical energy, and suppressing our emotion make this energy toxic to our bodies. And so a lot of times, especially depending on how you were raised and what you were taught about emotions, we suppress them and we avoid them and we try not to think about it. But if you think about emotions, if we didn't have emotions, right, like we wouldn't experience life.
Right.
Like emotion gives our life color. And I always use that example with clients. So when we suppress our emotions, it's like a vortex. You can't filter out the bad without sucking in, like sucking the good in. And that usually creates numbness because we are trying to shut down a part of us that God has created for us to experience life with each other, like life in general. And so numbness is created. Another thing that we do is try to suppress memory. There's no research on it, but I don't think that this is what caused dementia and Alzheimer's, because you're shutting down a part of your brain, you're trying to remember, you're suppressing it for years and years and years, and not dealing with your trauma, and it damages your brain because you're doing something that your body wasn't designed to do. And so when we go against how God has designed our bodies in order for us to heal, in order for us to live and experience life. When we do the opposite of that, we in turn are going against our bodies, whether our body's going against us. I know there's been many times I felt like my body is betraying me or going against me or not doing what I wanted to do, but our body is constantly trying to communicate what it means. Like if you're feeling pain in some part of your body is trying to tell you like, hey, something is not right. It's not normal to feel pain. It's not like that is a signal. So when we learn to pick up on these signals of what our body is trying to communicate, then we can work with our bodies rather than against our bodies. I talked about that a little bit last night. And so some of the things that happen when we suppress our emotions, it comes out of physical illness. Like I said last night, like fibromyalgia, there's no client that I have that has fibromyalgia that don't have significant trauma that they were avoiding their whole life. And it was cool because we did one mental health conference in Charlottesville, and I met this guy who was talking about how his wife had fibromyalgia, and as she started to deal with trauma and actually started to deal with the stuff in her past, her symptoms got less, and she was getting medication and rarely had pain. And so it's just really cool to hear how his wife was eventually healing and just that success story. They don't know the top of it. So if you create a physical illness, like again, your body is like trying to get your attention and hey, take care of me. It comes out as anger outbursts, aggression. Especially when you're taught, oh, in order to be heard, in order to be important, I need to yell, I need to write things to get you to get your attention and to stop and listen to me. It makes you impulsive. You have crying spells, or you are crying and not knowing why because you don't have put names to your emotions. You blow things out of proportion where someone may call you sensitive, and then like you go into a bit of rage, but with that word may have all this trauma that we haven't dealt with, and so it makes things that may be small into something big. It looks like poor boundaries where you're trying to fix people or looking for people to fix you. It has poor communication skills where you're passive aggressive and aggressive. It makes you withdraw and isolate. It creates social anxiety for kids. Sometimes it makes them run away. Or for us, we run away from situations. We're like, I'm just gonna stop. I'm not dealing with it versus having the courage to have those conversations, those hard conversation. It looks like self-harm. A lot of people self-harm, like I mentioned earlier, because emotional pain is so hard to deal with, and because people can't see it, like, and it's sometimes can be so hard to control that people feel like the only way that they can get relief if they turn their emotional pain into something physical. We would rather sometimes deal with the physical pain than actually deal with the emotional pain. And so a lot of like my clients hate when I go to the emotions, but it's so uncomfortable, and because the body is so used to disassociating, which means that your mind, your heart, and your body are always connected. And so usually people are in their head and they're thinkers. They worry a lot, or they're in their emotions, and they're very sensitive, and they're always crying. You can say a small thing to them, and they just like blow it out of proportion, always crying, or is very physical, and they have a lot of body pain. So when you're disconnected in those areas, you're dominant in one of those areas. And the only way to heal is to reassociate your body and be in tune and be present with yourself again. So it looks like eating disorders, again, trying to control your life, addiction, OCD, and depression. So I showed this diagram last night as well. Your body is always communicating to you. So if there's any physical pain that you are going through throughout the day, just say you had a long day, your body feels heavy. Examine. Is your arms heavy? Is your shoulders heavy? Is your chest tight or feels achy? Is your heart achy? Your stomach feels tense or sore on the side? Is your hips inflamed? Like, examine those parts of your body. And I love this diagram that we haven't missed yet with my clients. Typically, these are some of the emotions that you're experiencing. And once you can name your emotions, then you can decide again, freedom of choice. Okay, I feel like I got a lot on my shoulders. What are some things that I'm trying to control that I don't control? Let it go. and focus on the things that's in your control, or your throat is sore, what are some things that I feel like I need to express that I'm holding in, or I'm suppressing, maybe you need to go have a conversation, maybe you just need somebody to listen and vent to you, so doing that, maybe your chest is hurting, and you have all these feelings, and disappointments, maybe you need to journal, or just cry, or talk to someone that you trust. And then you just go on and on, just looking at, if this is what I'm feeling, asking your body what you need, so that you can be able to take care of it. So I just really love this chart, because as you practice it, you'll be able to identify what you feel very quickly, which means you'll be able to be in tune and aware of any changes in your body, because you're practicing, your mind is becoming reassociated with your thoughts and your body, so that you can be able to do this. So this, I really love this. If I put a spiritual thing on it, I will call these stabilized. So these are cognitive distortions on, everyone on some level have cognitive distortion. When you have mental health issues, these things are definitely, to the more extreme. And I'll just go through a few of them. I love it because it's so validated. I think on average, a human has anywhere between 7,000 and 70,000 thoughts a day, which is crazy. And of course, the one in this one. So these are just patterns that we may see in our thinking, and when you start to identify, oh, I'm catastrophizing. Like, this is a cognitive distortion, and then you use the skill of caregiving, which is part of the CBT model, and then you can put a name to it and choose. Again, it gives you the freedom of choice. I can choose to believe this thought, or I can do something different. So the first one is polarized thinking, which is just black and white thinking, like all or nothing, I'm either all in, or I'm not gonna do it all at all. So these where people with perfectionism come in. I have to be all A's. If I make a B, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough. I either go on this diet and do well and not mess up at all. But if I mess up, then I gotta start over. So there's no gray area, just very extremes. And then we have like a mental filtering. So negative mental filtering. And so like it's discounting, only looking at the negative of the situation. So if I give you 10 positive compliments, and then one thing that you can work on, you're gonna ignore or discount the positive and only focus on the negative. Or you have like all these good things that happen in your day, and one bad thing happens, you're gonna ignore all the positive and focus on that one negative thing. Which usually is very discouraging and make you feel down. Overgeneralizations, having one situation, and then, for example, I failed one test. Well, now I'm gonna fail all my classes, I'm gonna fail out of school. So it's taking one situation and applying it to everything. That is similar to that situation, which is just not true. Some other ones I'll just skip down. Oh, I gotta do this one. Jump into conclusion. So minor reading or fortune, thinking that that person looked at me a certain way, so they must be mad, or that person. Or that person, I spoke to that person and they didn't say anything back. And I don't know about you, I disassociate a lot, and I'll just stare, and maybe when I'm staring, but I'm actually in my head. And so maybe that person that you spoke to was so much in their head that they didn't even see it, and it had nothing to do with you. But because you think you're mind reader, and that you can read the thoughts of other people, now you have all these assumptions, all these negative feelings from an interaction that probably isn't what it appears to be. Or fortune telling, predicting in the future, like, okay, if this happened, or just predicting like this person is not gonna show up for me, or I'm not gonna talk to that person because they're gonna like have this type of reaction. So just basically pretending that you know what's gonna happen. And all of these things is happening because your brain is trying to protect you. It's trying to prepare you for the worst case scenario so that it can make sure that you stay safe, whether emotionally, physically, or mentally. So it is trying to give, and Karen talked about it yesterday, dealing with life. In your life, trying to draw conclusions so that it can keep you alive and well. One of the ones that challenged me was having reward boundaries. So being rewarded off of hard work. So if I'm a good person and I do what's right, and the bad thing comes to happen to me. But that's not reality. That's gonna happen. Bad things are gonna happen. Whether you are a good person or a bad person, it's just like you can't stop goodness from happening to you. No matter how much you try, good things will happen to you. But you also can't stop bad things from happening to you. No matter how much you try, bad things are going to happen to you because we live in this fallen world. And so to tie our self-worth or our needs to what is happening to us is a trap. So it's like, I remember coming back, I was like, God, I just did this 1 year challenge for you. How could you do this to me? And it's just like, that doesn't happen. That's just a part of life. And so not getting caught up in those traps. Another one is just emotional reasoning, because I feel this way is true. Feelings aren't facts, they're information, but they're not facts. And so again, it's your body communicating that you're feeling something, and to be able to see what you're feeling and actually being able to identify it, then you can process it. So these are just jumping all over, but these are some of the common 15 thoughts. So I talked about earlier, there's this app called the CBT Thought Diary. And so it walks you through this, it kind of asks you, what are your emotions for the day? How are you feeling? What are things contributing to those emotions? Is it school? Is it work? Is it family? Is it friend? And then it kind of asks you, what is the negative thought that you're having for that day? For example, I'm gonna have a bad day. And then it asks you to pick which one of these cognitive distortions you are experiencing. And then it asks you to reframe in a more accurate way of looking at this situation. So it kind of walks you through the step of reframing how you think and see things. So healing through the 3 R's. We've talked a lot about mindfulness today and yesterday, kind of keeps coming up. But mindfulness is just basically being aware of your thoughts, your body sensations, your feelings without judgment. It's accepting what you cannot change and focusing on what you can. At the bottom, these are some 4 ways to practice mindfulness. So mindful meditation, which is just practicing being mindful of the breath, like Kara did yesterday. Where do you feel the breath in your nose? That's the mindful meditation. Oh, that's work. Mental body scan, so going through each part of your body and identifying the sensations that you're feeling. Again, using that chart that we looked at earlier. Going on a mindful walk, going outside and looking at the beauty that God created up here in Jordan. Noticing things that you probably notice. Leave your phone at home, just going for a walk and just being in awe. We have so much straight creation here to be in awe with, and just to be amazed by God, and to look at the details, the colors, using your 5 senses to connect, the smell, the taste, the air, what you hear, you see, just to connect to what's around you. Doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, looking for 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, 3 things you hear, 1 thing you taste, and 1 thing you smell. To really just ground yourself and come back to the present moment. Usually we get caught up in our imagination. Our imagination is what it is, it's not real. And we can imagine the worst to come, or we can meditate on the past and ruminate on the past, or but it's just made up. It's not real. And it can feel real and create these real body sensations of anxiety. But we can also use our imagination to heal us and imagine the good things. A lot of times we imagine what could go wrong. What if we start imagining what could go right? And it changes how you see things, like what could possibly happen, but the brain, again, wants to protect you and it's going to try to fill in the gas. And so we have to actively try to think differently in order to have hope with it. Right. So I want to do one emotional exercise. So Brent gave you guys this worksheet, so we're gonna go into steps on how to express your emotions. I use this a lot with my clients who have a hard time identifying emotions or who are in relationships and communication is really hard. So I will just fill this out and give it to the person that you roll with, so you won't have to worry about saying what you feel. So we'll go through this together. As you can see, there's 3 running circles. So I know you got a lot of information from today, so I want to use today how you're feeling, what you're feeling in your body, to really process, just to really process what you're feeling from this day. So we're gonna start with the inner circle. And so you just wanna circle or highlight which emotion you're feeling. Also, I have more, so you can use this one, I'm plenty, if you wanna take a few copies and use it later. So feel free to use this one. So you wanna choose, do you feel sad, do you feel mad today, do you feel scared, joyful, powerful, or peaceful? This one may not have those same words, so yeah, you're good for this. So you want to choose and just circle whichever one you're feeling. And then you can see each of the inner circle has a triangle. So you continue to expand on that emotion, giving it more language, more details of how you're feeling. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds to fill that out. And then you go to the last circle, again, expanding on that emotion. And once you do that, I want you to choose one of the emotions that you feel most intensely today. And you can write that on that emotion on the back, put the paper over it. And then you want to rate that emotion. How intensely are you feeling that emotion today on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being not that intensely, and being extreme. Next, you want to draw a representation of that emotion. So this part of this is so important because it connects to our right brain and it helps us to express and expand our emotions in a different way. So it's connected to that creativity. So it can be a sick person, it can be a smiling face. I've had people draw really cool things. One person was feeling overwhelmed, so they drew themselves holding up like the weight of their problems, the weight of other people's problems. It's a sick person, and it makes you like I'm sinking and sink. And it's just something about putting it in a visual that gives you even more relief of expressing yourself. Then you want to draw a sick person and just circle the parts of your body where you feel this emotion. Is it in your head? Is it in your neck? Is it in your shoulders, your chest, your legs, your feet? Sometimes it can be hard for people when you've been so out of your body and so disconnected. It's easier in your mind. So sometimes it can be really hard to identify your sensations, but when the more you sit with your body, it will tell you what you feel. Next, you want to identify what urges do you feel from this. Do it make you want to sleep? Do it make you want to run away? Do it make you cry? Do it make you fight? It makes you want to change? Like what urges created from these emotions? And this is really helpful because sometimes people that have anger and they just need to express like, man, I just want to punch me in the face. And then you just need to be able to say that without judgment, or man, I just want to hurt myself. And people just need to get it out because otherwise it just ruminates in front of your head. And you feel a little things, but not going to say just to say exactly what you feel. And what you mean. So just getting it out can make a difference. And then next we're going to use these are called I feel statements. So I feel sad because, or I'll use my I feel happy because I love being in class and being the word class and the memories. Or I feel sleepy So whatever you feel, so it's taking your emotions and giving them reasons of why you're feeling it. So this can be really good with those cognitive distortions, and being able to connect your emotions with your thoughts. So you're deepening your expression. So it's important in this way, getting that toxic energy that's stored in your body and getting it out in so many different ways that you feel fully heard and fully like you've got everything else to express. And then lastly, just choose one coping skill to decrease the intensity of this emotion that is negative. So I gave you a list of coping skills, 84 that you can choose from. And this is basically nurturing yourself after you have guiding up your emotions, guiding up what you feel, guiding up what you really think, where you're feeling it. Now you gotta nurture yourself, take care of yourself. Maybe you need to go for a walk. Maybe you need to follow a friend to express this to. Maybe you need to see your family. Hey, this is how you do. Whatever you need, listening to your body and nurturing what is happening for. The next one is reset. So this is kind of the coping skills that you can do. This is also a part of DBT, which is distress tolerance skills. So DIRPROVE is an acronym of different coping skills that you can use. So your imagination, kind of what I said earlier, you use your imagination to invoke peaceful feelings. One of my favorite things to do is imagine a safe place. My safe place is big field and has like this brick wall around this field and has this green door, and inside of it is just a field of lavender and flowers. And so you use your five senses to pretend that you're in your safe place, and you're gonna identify the things that you see. Then you're gonna identify the things that you smell, and hear, and taste, and feel, and just sit there. And this is really good when you're feeling really stressed out and your imagination is going left with worries. You can use this to do the scriptures. I is such a visual person, and it gives very like descriptive, very dramatic ways of him coming down to rescue us. Like a dragon, or he's gonna take our sins and kick them in the ocean. Like he's very good at like trying to evoke vision for us. So taking scriptures where God is describing himself and really trying to sit and imagine God doing these things with us and for us and near us. I love when he talks about encamping us in his wings. That's where I go when I feel like I need to be comforted. I just imagine myself telling God everything that I'm feeling, and he can just scoop me up with his wings and just hold it. And just sitting there and allowing your imagination to make that feel real and present in your life. So finding meaning, like I said earlier, just maybe doing a gratitude and finding meaning in the negative that you've been to. So a lot of people with grief usually try to do something to honor that person who died. I know our church in Curry, they do a golf is it a fundraiser? A golf fundraiser every year when it's a movie of him. So like taking something that was tragic and making it beautiful and meaningful. Prayer, going for a walk, having a mantra, listing out 5 things that you're grateful for. I know one of my friends, I loved her mantra, and I started for a while. And so a lot of times as a kid, you were told to be made small. Well, some people were told to be made small, and like kids are meant to be seen, not heard. And so one of her mantras was, I'm allowed to take up space. I'm allowed to feel what I feel. I'm allowed to have emotions. I'm allowed to show up for myself and not feel ashamed of the emotions and feelings that I have, or like having to ignore what I feel so that I can give to other people and not take care of myself. So I really love that mantra that she had. Relaxation, so doing breaths. One of the what Kara talked about was about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. So one of the ways that I like my clients to be able to access that part of their body that calms them down is called nostril breathing. And so basically you hold out your nose, one of your nostrils, and you breathe up through one, and then you hold that breath and switch. and then you breathe out the other, and you just do that for like 5 to 10 minutes. And it really does calm you down. A lot of my clients who have a hard time sleeping, use it and find it to be really helpful. It's really good for panic attacks because it accesses that nervous system, that part of the nervous system that helps you calm down and give you relief. So I really like it when I'm stressed out. I was just laying in bed, starting with 5 minutes, then 10. They even done research, if you do it for 30 minutes a day, it helps with your heart, it helps with your mental health. And it helps with your lung capacity, you being able to like hold your breath longer. So there's all these health benefits, even if you don't have anxiety, just to practice, and helping your nervous system and training your nervous system how to relax. So when you are stressed out, you're gonna build those roles that Kara was talking about to be able to like, I'm stressed out when you go to the hospital. This is really powerful skills. I highly recommend practicing these things when you're not in distress. Because when you are, your brain is gonna go back to the negative ways, that it has coped within the past, like your brain, it's gonna go off what it knows. So if your negative, coping skill is eating, when you're distressed, your body's gonna go to eating because that's what it's, it works, it has kept you safe, it has taken care of your emotions. And so it needs to be informed and get new information of how to keep you safe, how, to regulate you, so they can be like, okay, that no longer serves me, I know this work because I've been practicing it and it's helped me so many times before, so I'm gonna choose this one because this one has less guilt, less shame. But it takes practicing every day, and it will take a lot of work, so that is part of the work of healing, is being disciplined and using the skills. Taking one moment at a time, taking it day by day, moving to do list, doing things that makes you feel happy. You want to go memorize scriptures, count to 10, organizing your rooms, just doing things like that. Taking a vacation, this could be taking yourself out on a date, please date yourself. If you don't know how to make yourself happy, you can expect other people to know how to do it. So go on dates. Take yourself to the coffee shop, go for a walk, go next to God, doing something where you're retreating and having time to yourself to get away from the stress and worries of life. So it don't necessarily have to mean to take a trip. And then encouragement, telling yourself mantras or I got this, practicing basically positive self-talk, like even rehearsing scripture. One of the things I've been trying to do for myself is really say what God said about me and not what trauma says about me, what past said about me, what shame said about me, really holding on like, no, I can treasure the Bible. I'm valuable, really fighting against the lies of Satan, really trying to tell you that it's the end of my strength. So reset. I know it's been a long day, so we're just gonna do a couple stretches, so you could just stand up. And we will do some of these things together. So we're only gonna do it for 10 seconds. We're gonna do this, lock your fingers, and then turn to your side and hold it for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let it go. Do the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. Next, you're gonna reach up to the sky. You can stand on your tiptoes to make it a deeper stretch and hold that for 9, 10. I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. Now you're gonna lock your arms and squeeze to the side. Hold that for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Switch to the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. And then rotate your shoulders. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you're gonna put your arms behind your back and squeeze that, hold one arm. Squeeze that for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Switch, hold down the other arm. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your hands together and just go up and down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. So this is good because like throughout the day, I hope you feel that energy as your body stretch and get some relief. You can do this when you're feeling really stressed out. You can do it outside is really good. I do this in between sessions to get some of that energy out from my clients and their emotions. So these are just very simple stretches that you can do throughout the day just to give yourself some relief. So that is all. Any questions? Karen's got it on.
Oh, Kara's gonna do it. Okay. So we are coming into the home stretch, but I was gonna do a stretch to go along with the home stretch, but Eric already stretched. So we're all stretched already. So we're gonna, it's great that you're here, glad that you came. I have some questions that we're gonna look at. As we think about doing these assessments, we think about all of this sort of internal investigation, thinking through what we're feeling and thinking. What's that? Oh, okay. Is that up there now? It's beautiful painting. Go ahead and turn to Luke 10 while my IT expert is pulling up my handout. We are gonna just, for the next 20 minutes, I'm gonna give 5 minutes back to your life, and we're gonna pray and be done. Is we're gonna look at how our mental health affects our spiritual health, but I want to do it in the context of Luke chapter 10. So go ahead and turn there, and we're gonna see a parable. If you can't get it, it's really not a big deal. It's just sort of questions. I can actually read them from here, so that's cool. I appreciate it. So what I did want us to look at is when we think about our mental health and how it can affect ourselves spiritually. So how many of you own a vehicle? Right? Pretty much everybody. When do you typically think about making sure that that vehicle is maintained? When do you tune into, like, how's the oil doing? How are the brakes? When do you normally think about that in a very specific kind of way? When there's a signal, that's a good one. Yeah, for sure. And sometimes, you know, you'd be like, hey, yeah, this light's been on for like the last 3 months. No, you just gotta tell me as soon as it comes on. What else? When it breaks down. Yeah, that kind of makes you focus on like what kind of meetings has been happening. What else? When else do we think about maintenance? Brakes making a weird sound, right? Yeah, I also think like if I know my daughter just moved down to Miami, so it's like I'm taking her car in now because my wife's gonna drive her down a long road trip. Like that's not when you want your car to break down. And I think a lot of life events can be like a long road trip, like something intense is about to happen, or you're on this journey and it's sort of very pronounced. But I think what we need to pause and reflect on is that a lot of times we're like, I'm just running to Kroger, I'm just running to the grocery store, I don't even have my oil checked. And what happens is enough of those days come together, and pretty soon you're 3, 4, 5 months down the line. And you haven't been doing the daily maintenance that gets your car into a great shape, because we don't really want the light to come on. We don't really want to be broken down on the side of the road. It's really being able to listen and tune in to the sounds that our brakes are making and all those kinds of things, right? Does that make sense? And so I came across some questions that are really ultimately sort of how we reflectively listen to other people, right? But I realized that they can also be super helpful as we are thinking through the areas of our life that are spinning, what thoughts do we have, all of these various things. And we can apply the same principles of listening to ourselves as we would if I'm sitting down with Randy and he's kind of unloading and sharing some heavy things. the way that I would want to listen to him is very often the way that we should be listening to ourselves. Dr. Jennifer Conson talks a lot about sort of like, you have these anxious thoughts, and it's like, let's just avoid them, and it's like, how do you treat people when they come up to you and they're kind of agitated? You just say, oh, just go away, or I'm gonna walk away and ignore. It's like, let me take and listen to you, anxious thought, and give you some space and give you some time, really asking the question, why is this feeling here? Why is this happening? So in the same way, again, this will be on the website, but carve out some time, alone time, to ask yourself questions and reflect. How is my body? How is my emotions doing? What thoughts am I having? Paraphrase. I think I'm feeling this thought because we did this at a marriage retreat one time, and I can't tell you how many times I got it wrong. My wife would say something, and it's like, so what you're feeling is, and she's like, no, like you're doing the same thing just now, like what did you hear? And so learning to paraphrase, you think you got it. And so again, that's a little more difficult, but it's you telling yourself how you feel, and that's where a friend or a therapist can help. But pausing and reflecting, okay, I think I'm feeling this because this is what's coming to me. And so paraphrasing. Asking good follow-up questions to unpack the details. Not just what am I feeling, but why am I feeling that? Show empathy. A lot of times we're quick to be like, well, I shouldn't be feeling that, or I could be more mature, or I could be more patient, or I could be more faithful. You can kind of apply to things like that. So show empathy and avoid judgment. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to arrive at a place that's like, yeah, this isn't a healthy pattern, or this isn't spiritual. But initially, just judging something leaves it very little space to sort of get unpacked. I think if we read through the Psalms, a lot of Psalms would be super short if the psalmist just said, oh, I shouldn't be thinking that or praying that or singing that or whatever, but they work themselves through after having the freedom to express some feelings and thoughts that aren't so great, right? So we see that in the scriptures. And give yourself time to process all those different things. It's not going to be a quick fix. But we're going to close out today, and we're going to look at a, again, very, very famous passage as we think about how can our mental health and the way that we're thinking about ourselves and the world, how that can impact our spiritual health. And we're going to look at the parable of the Good Samaritan. And you may be like, what does this have to do with our mental health affecting our spiritual health? Well, let's go ahead and read there, and then we're going to actually look at Mary and Martha. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. He asked, teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What's written in the law? He replied, how do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You've answered correctly, Jesus replied, do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and he saw him and took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him into an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3 do you think was the neighbor to the man who fell into the hand of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. So why do you think I'm sharing this passage about these 3 different people interacting with this man that's been beaten along the side of the road as it relates to how our mental health affects our spiritual health? I'm going to make you do a little work here at the end of the day. What on earth does this have to do with where people are mentally and how it affects them spiritually? What was happening here? It's a pretty quick parable, but it's pretty deep. Avoidance, right? Okay, what else? Ever thought about the scripture in the context of where the Levite and where the priests were mentally and how that impacted them spiritually? They were afraid. What were they afraid of? Anything? Sure. Yep. Okay. Maybe felt under threat. Yeah. Okay. So they're very tuned into how they view themselves, how they view other people. Yep, Kara. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we don't have time. I really believe though that the Levite and the priest they were in a certain mental space where they viewed how God viewed them. And that transitioned onto other people. So there were some like unclean issues and whatnot, and there was issues of maybe I'll get attacked, or any number of different things. But I think because they were not in a space to really examine, how does God feel about me? What is my life in terms of God? How valuable I am? Why does he really want me here? They passed by an opportunity to exhibit God to this person clearly in need. Of course, where they were at mentally, and of course, where it hit them emotionally. And the hero of the story is someone who shouldn't have a clue about what God would want them to do. But it was very obvious, like, this person needs help, I'm going to do it. And what's crazy is they actually conducted an experiment at a seminary where they gave seminary students an assignment to go give a lesson on the Good Samaritan. And they did some different things where they gave them the wrong address, or someone came in and said, oh, shoot, class got changed, you need to be there in 10 minutes. And as these students went to go deliver this lesson, there was a person in their path that was clearly in need. And about 90% of them or so didn't meet the need. Because they're like, I'm gonna get in trouble if I show up to left. And it was all about kind of where they were at mentally, right? And all the things that were spinning. And here was this, I'm gonna go do a lesson about God and completely ignore a real life lesson about God. And so it's critical for us, again, to take this inventory. A lot of the different tools that are going to be on the website is for us to really pause and say, why am I so impatient with my son, Grant? Just kidding. Yes, use me as an example. But why am I snapping at my wife? Why did I just lose my temper with the dog? Is it really the dog? Is it really because she took too long to come in and she was, my dog Willow knows when I'm calling her in, she can tell when I'm tense. Because she's supposed to just do my thing, just go to the bathroom and come back quickly, but she has to smell everything. And so the more I rise in my tension, you know what she does? She slows down and she smells more. Because she knows she's gonna get in trouble when she comes in, so she might as well take advantage of the time that she's out, so that it makes me be like, what are you doing? I said, hurry up, and it doesn't go well. And then I try to change my tone. She's like, I know you're still mad, like I can tell in your tone. And it's because this project or something else, or I gotta go to the store, and it's not the dog that she's taking an extra 3 minutes to go outside. And so that being still and knowing where I'm at, what am I processing? Because I think all of us admit in our lives, we want to be the Good Samaritan. In a place mentally and emotionally where we can be present and see where and how God wants to use us. But that's really difficult when we're in a tough spot. We won't read it, but right after that, we find the story of Mary and Martha. And that's another really great example. And I'll encourage you, we gotta be careful we don't project truth into the Bible. We gotta read it for what the context is and not be too careful. But I really believe that we can go through, and I think we're going to see tomorrow as we look at a story in the Old Testament about when God met somebody who, for all intents and purposes, was having a mental breakdown. But there is a lot of mental health stuff happening in the Bible. There's a lot of emotional health stuff happening in the Bible. And Mary and Martha is there, and Martha's doing something good, right? She's having Jesus over for dinner. But how would we describe her mental state? Where's Martha at in that story?
Control.
She's controlling because she's telling the Lord, how my sister to help me. Why am I the only one working? So she's commanding the Lord to do something, to control it. What else is she? Where else is she at mentally? And how is it impacting her spiritually? Like there's tons of scriptures that answer this question. How does our mental state affect our spiritual state? What else is she doing?
If she had anxiety, because she's trying to please.
Yeah. Yeah.
Days of practice and hospitality.
Absolutely.
Checking anxiety.
She's having anxiety, she's stressed, she wants to have a good dinner, and who thinks that she might have had some issues with Mary before Jesus showed up? You didn't know me then either. That's how we talk. And so in this situation, kind of where she was at mentally is Jesus is right there, but all she's sort of concerned about is maybe Mary help, and I'm trying to get, and he's like, I won't do it. Because she's actually chosen what's best. And so that's another place, my wife and I call it business mode, where we'd be having people, getting ready to have people over, we'd be sort of tense and scrambling around and like, stop. Because what I hated more than anything is kind of tense and sitting like, Diana, David, welcome, come on in. It's like, that's all like creepy and fake. So we tried to stop each other to say, wait a second, it's just David and Diana. Come on, guys. They're not going to care for us, that little dog here. Like, it's okay. Let's slow down mentally so that we can be present spiritually. So I encourage you, this is a lot to go through, a lot of different information. You have people in your lives that you're going to go back and share little snippets of, but I'd encourage you again to take your own inventory, to evaluate again what areas you feel like are the bats then. What areas you feel like your body is communicating to you trauma, things that you haven't quite dealt with. Questions about therapy. You're really thinking, I really feel like I need therapy, or this person in my life that could warrant a conversation with Carol or somebody to say, what steps could I take? And that might be another really helpful exercise, is to kind of write down, what are the top 3 things I took away from the workshop today? It's kind of like when we go to a conference and we're learning 20 things to be like Jesus. It's like, okay, let me just kind of focus on 1 or 2. And so really taking the opportunity to process, ask yourselves those questions, so that God is able to kind of move you into a space where it is an information overload, but you're able to process them in a way that, again, you can be the whole person that God has designed you to be. So lots of great resources. God has definitely designed us to be able to live this life in a broken world with all kinds of trauma and stresses and demands upon us, but to do it in a way where we're really capable of loving Him with all of our mind, body, soul, and strength, because He wouldn't command it if it wasn't possible. So isn't it amazing that His grace and His goodness directs us back to a space where we can fulfill that in our lives? And this is ultimately what this is all about, is being able to celebrate who God is and who He made us to be. Amen. Let's close out with a prayer. God, we're really grateful for this opportunity, so much information, and as anybody who's come up today, you know, we're just scratching the surface of mental health, different conditions, all of the different questions to ask therapists, all of the different ways that trauma and pain and grief, there's so much misinformation. I know that so many times out of sincerity, God, that I've shared the wrong thing. I've said things that got on the screen today, like, oh, how many times did I try to connect and in a sense, kind of minimize what they were experiencing, because I didn't want them to be sad. And so I shared something that ultimately sort of minimized their situation. But God, it's great that we can learn. It's great that there are so many resources and apps and people and professionals, and it is a journey. We won't always find the right therapist, and sometimes we'll find a really awesome hearted disciple, and we won't share the perfect thing. Even what Grant shared, the guys that went on to become the apostles, they couldn't even stay awake with him for an hour at his hour of need. But we are grateful that we have a perfect God, that you are outside of time and space. You built us, you designed us, you love us, and you'll guide us on this journey. We pray that we can be more mindful about the regular maintenance that we need. We know that there are going to be signals that Our bodies are communicating, our thoughts are communicating. But help us to pause in an ever spinning world to be able to seek you, move in your direction so that you can guide us all the way home. We love you and pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. We have done. Thanks for coming.
One of which is.
You know what time? Used to.
Yeah.
Grant's gonna play in the coffee shop. I want to stuff.
I will.
Oh, almost, yeah, that's legit, man. Probably this like, probably was.
Yeah, man. Take some food.
Stop.
I definitely.
Stop your.
Stop that.